Mechanical stroke risk using to datasets, number 1533, VPT 086, the 12th of February 2026, Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category stroke. Preface. Professor Norman Jones trained me to see failure mechanisms, load distribution, irreversible deformation, and cumulative damage. That training taught me to think in terms of stress, strain, fatigue, and rupture. Professor Patrick Winston trained me to think in patterns recognition, concept abstraction, graphics representation, and causality. That combined training taught me to see systems, not isolated numbers. When I look at glucose, blood pressure, vessel stiffness, or stroke risk, I do not see separate laboratory values. I see trajectories, accumulation, deformation, and structural vulnerability. That is engineering cognition applied to biomedicine. Years gave me necessary tools. My own integrity, persistence, and passion made those tools powerful. My health and mortality diseases suffering later in life gave those learned tools a mission. This paper reflects that combination. Introduction. I analyze my stroke risk using two layers of data. Layer 2 2026 annual data, showing a 13-year structural trend. Layer 2 2024 KFUR to 2026 CONI quarterly data, showing the critical pre-stroke and post-stroke window. This is not a stroke prediction paper. This is a mechanical risk monitoring paper. I am not asking, will I have a second stroke? I am asking, what is the mechanical stress condition of my cerebral vessels? Long-term structural trend 201 for 2026 1 FPG. In 2014, my FPG was 128 mg DL. Over the next decade, it improved into the high 80s to low 90s range. In 2026 it rose to 98 mg DL. Likely reflecting some metabolic disturbance after my stroke in June 2025. Even so, this FPG level remains a major improvement compared to my severe type 2 diabetes period. To pulse pressure PP. From 2015 to 2018, PP was around 40 mmHg. It gradually rose and peaked around 49 to 50 in 2024. After the stroke, it dropped back to approximately 45 mmHg in 2025 to 2026. Interpretation. Vessel stiffness gradually worsened before the stroke and then improved afterward. 3. Mean arterial pressure MAP was relatively low in 2016-2018, around 78 mmHg. It climbed to approximately 86 to 87 by 20-3-20 to 5. In 2026 Q1 it dropped to 83.34 mmHg. Interpretation. Steady pressure load increased in the years leading up to the stroke and then declined after it. Structurally, the brief description is, before the stroke, higher PP plus higher MAP equals higher mechanical stress. After the stroke, lower PP plus lower MAP equals reduced chronic load. This is not an emotional conclusion, it is a mechanical analysis. Quarterly critical window. We look at the danger zone using quarterly data. Right before the stroke, 202 for Q for PP 50.61 MAP 91.77 202 5 Q1 PP 51, 90 MAP 90.06. 205 Q to PP 47, 71 MAP 90.57. During this period, PP was above 50, MAP was around 90 to 92. That combination means stiff cerebral vessels plus high steady pressure load. This is a fragile structure under chronic stress. Then in 205 Q2, I suffered a hemorrhagic stroke near the pontine region. After the stroke, 205 Q3 PP for 4.19 MAP 80 for 0.21 205 Q for PP for 5.78 MAP 85.38. 206 Q1 PP 45.10 MAP 83.3 for now. PP is below 46. MAP is below 85. This is clearly a lower mechanical load condition. Chronic stress and acute trigger. My fasting glucose before the stroke was not severely elevated. FPG was in the mid-80s. The primary mechanical issue at that moment was not glucose itself. However, years of diabetes had already damaged my brain vessels through calcification. The immediate mechanical problem was increased vessel stiffness and high pressure load, and rupture occurred when an acute hypertensive spike was applied to that weakened structure. High stiffness plus high steady pressure equals structural vulnerability. However, chronic stress alone does not always cause rupture. There is often a final trigger. In my case, that trigger was likely an acute SBP spike reaching 175 mmHg on June 21, 2025. I was not a classic chronic hypertension patient based on my 15-year clinical record. Budone extreme spike acting on a calcified brain microvessel was sufficient to cause rupture. My case is a classic structural failure. Chronic load builds weakness. Acute overload causes collapse. Post-stroke mechanical correction. After the stroke, two major changes occurred over the last 3/4, approximately 8 months. 1. Chronic load reduced. PP fell from above 50 to around 45. MAP fell from around 91 to around 83 to 85.2. Acute SBP spike control became strict as a result of my newly acquired knowledge and daily efforts to manage emotional stress. My daily monitoring shows SBP above 130 less than 10%, SBP above 140 less than 1%, none above 150 mHg. This matters. Rupture is often triggered by extreme transient pressure, not by averages alone. So my current mechanical structure is lower chronic blood pressure load, tightly controlled acute SBP spikes. That combination logically reduces my brain vessel's rupture risk. To datasets, one conclusion: the 13-year dataset shows long-term buildup. The quarterly dataset shows the critical danger window and the corrected zone. Before stroke, highest stiffness in years. Highest steady pressure load in years. After stroke, both parameters moved into a safer range. I do not claim my stroke probability dropped by X%. Instead, I state, before my stroke on June 21, 2025, both vessel stiffness and steady pressure load were at their highest levels in over a decade. After the stroke, both measures declined into a safer range. This reduces continuous mechanical stress on brain vessels. Combined with strict control of sudden SBP spikes through emotional stress control, the structural conditions that led to rupture are now significantly improved. This observed explanation is scientifically responsible, clear, strong, and not exaggerated. Mechanical risk monitoring from work. I am not predicting a second stroke. I am monitoring my mechanical risk level. That is the correct engineering mindset. If I define a simple stroke mechanical risk proxy, it can be expressed conceptually as stroke risk proxy equals A times PP plus B times MAP plus C times SBP spike, where A, B, and C represent appropriate weighting factors. PP represents vessel stiffness, MAP represents steady mechanical load, SBP spike represents transient overload. PP and MAP serve as the background structural stress, while the SBP spike acts as the immediate trigger for another stroke. Meanwhile, FEG remains a more distant metabolic stressor that contributes to long-term vessel calcification. My personal safety dashboard now is very simple and clear. PP target less than 45. MAP target less than 85. SBP spikes above 140 less than 1%. No stochastic jargon, no complex equations. Just mechanical safety margin. This is how an engineer manages bridge strength for fatigue and collapse, which include long-term load, material stiffness, fatigue accumulation, then prevent sudden overload. Conclusion: this paper does not attempt to predict whether I will have a second stroke or not. It demonstrates that stroke can be analyzed as a mechanical stress-strain process using long-term trend data and short-term critical window data. I now have the 13-year structural trend, a defined pre-stroke high-load zone, a defined post-stroke corrected zone, a clear mechanical interpretation, a simple daily monitoring dashboard of prevention guidelines. This is solid engineering thinking applied to my stroke prevention. I am not forecasting destiny. I am maintaining structural safety margin. That is the correct mindset for long-term survival. This is engineering thinking applied on human survival. Note on breathing and blood pressure: when I inhale for 4 seconds and then exhale for 8 seconds, repeating this cycle 4 to 5 times, I can reduce my SBP by 10 to 15 mmHg within 1 minute. This is a clear example of active control applied to human physiology. By consciously adjusting my breathing pattern, which serves as the input, I activate the vagus nerve, which functions as a natural brake on heart rate and blood pressure, the output. From an engineering perspective, this is negative feedback regulation. Mechanics of the 4-to-8 breathing pattern: when the exhalation is extended to twice the length of inhalation, the autonomic nervous system shifts from sympathetic dominance, which is associated with higher pressure and stress, toward parasympathetic dominance, which promotes relaxation and lower pressure. During inhalation of 4 seconds, heart rate and blood pressure rise slightly due to sympathetic activation. During exhalation of 8 seconds, baroreceptors and the vagus nerve are stimulated, sending signals to the brain's control centers to slow the heart rate and dilate peripheral vessels. The net result is a rapid reduction in transient SBP load before it can create structural damage. Integration into the mechanical risk model: this breathing technique transforms me from a passive observer of my vascular condition into an active maintenance engineer of my own system. I am not merely measuring spikes, I am intervening in real time to prevent them. Strategic interpretation: the context of my stroke prevention framework. This method helps explain why my 2026 Q1 data appears significantly safer than MY 2005 Q1 data. The improvement is not accidental. It reflects deliberate high-frequency regulation that stabilizes long-term mechanical load. A 10 to 15 mmHg reduction within 1 minute represents a significant and measurable improvement in blood pressure control. It demonstrates that while vessel stiffness, reflected by PT, is a structural constraint, pressure levels such as SBP and MAP remain modifiable through conscious regulation. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease progression, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights belong to the author, Gerald C. HSU. This content is provided for educational reference only and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. Hsu.